Every so often, reality writes stories that even the best fiction could never dare imagine. Cases that defy logic, deaths that rewrite reason, and mysteries that refuse to stay buried. Across decades and continents, people have disappeared without a trace. Bodies have been found locked in rooms, burned valleys, and distant seas. The deeper investigators dig, the stranger the answers become, and sometimes there are no answers at all. From the MI6 Spy in the bag, whose lifeless body was discovered sealed in a padlocked duffel in the London bathtub, to the Isdal woman, a nameless figure whose charred remains and coded notepads led Norwegian police into a labyrinth of Cold War secrets. From Charles Morgan, a Tucson businessman, whose corpse was found with a $2 bill covered in cryptic messages, to Ricky McCormick, whose pockets carried 2 encrypted letters that even the FBI's best code breakers couldn't crack. These aren't urban legends. These are real. And each of them whispers the same thing. Someone knew more than they said. In this episode, we'll step into the chilling twilight between fact and speculation. Where the evidence is strange, the explanations are thin, and every theory feels just a little too plausible. We'll revisit Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance, the Vatican Girl's haunting absence, and the Somerton Man's final coded breath. Tamam shud, meaning it is finished, yet nothing about these stories feels finished. Each case is a time capsule of fear and fascination, locked by secrecy, silenced by power, or swallowed by time. And tonight, we're opening them all. Because these aren't just cold cases. They're windows into the unknown. And sometimes the truth doesn't hide in the dark. It lives there. It began with a silence that stretched for far too long. In August 2010, inside a modest flat in Pimlico, London, a place once thought to be just another MI6 safe house, the decomposing body of Gareth Williams was discovered. He was 31. Brilliant. A mathematical prodigy and codebreaker for GCHQ, on secondment to Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, MI6. But what police found that day defied explanation. Williams' naked body was curled inside a red North Face sports bag, the kid you'd take to the gym, zipped shut, padlocked from the outside, and placed neatly in his bathtub. There were no signs of struggle, no fingerprints on the lock, and most baffling of all, the key was inside the bag, beneath his body. Investigators would later ask the impossible question: could he have climbed in and locked himself inside? Experts tried. Escape artists tried. None could replicate it. Even seasoned contortionists failed. Around him, details only deepened the mystery. His phone had been wiped clean, factory reset within hours of his death. There was no forced entry, yet MI6 quietly replaced the front door to his flat. On the day he disappeared, Gareth was meant to chair a high-level meeting, one he never arrived for. And perhaps most unsettling of all, his absence went unreported by MI6 for an entire week. Rumors swirled. Some claimed the young codebreaker had ties to secret projects involving Russian cyber operations. Others pointed to a double life, a fascination with escapology and bondage roleplay, something tabloids were quick to sensationalize. But investigators could never connect to his death. In 2024, more than a decade later, Scotland Yard concluded Williams had likely died alone. But the coroner disagreed, insisting that the scene bore the hallmarks of a criminally orchestrated death. So what really happened in that quiet Pimlico apartment? Was it a tragic accident shrouded in secrecy? Or a message, carefully constructed by hands trained to leave no trace? Because in the world of intelligence, death isn't always the end of a mission. Sometimes it's the cover story. A man vanished into the heat of the desert, and when he was found, nothing about his death made sense. His name was Charles Morgan, a 39-year-old escrow agent, a quiet, respectable family man. But behind that polished image, Morgan was tangled in something much darker. According to investigators, he wasn't just moving property deeds and mortgage papers. He was allegedly helping the mafia launder money, converting millions in cash into gold bullion through secret deals. And when he became a witness in a confidential state investigation, that's when his life began to unravel. One morning, Morgan disappeared on his way to work. Days later, he stumbled home, disoriented and terrified, claiming he'd been kidnapped, and that a mysterious group had glued a hallucinogenic chemical to the back of his neck. He told his wife he couldn't go to the police because they were involved. 2 months later, he disappeared again. This time, he never came back. His body was found on a lonely stretch of desert road outside Tucson. A single bullet wound to the back of the head. He'd been shot with his own revolver. But there were no fingerprints, no signs of struggle, just an eerie collection of clues that made the scene feel staged, like a message. In his car nearby, police found ammunition, handcuffs, and, disturbingly, one of his own teeth wrapped in tissue paper. Pinned to his underwear was a $2 bill covered in cryptic writing. On it were 7 Spanish names, a map, and a Bible verse. Ecclesiastes 12:1-8, the passage about the end of life. Authorities ruled it a suicide. A man who somehow shot himself in the back of the head, wiped the gun clean, and arranged a coded scene that would confuse investigators for decades. Some believe Morgan was silenced for knowing too much about the Banco International de Arizona, a bank tied to organized crime and money laundering. Others think it was an elaborate government cover-up. Either way, the message left on that $2 bill reads like a warning from beyond the grave, a cipher that says more in what it hides than in what it reveals. In Tucson, justice dried up like the desert air, and Charles Morgan's final secret remains buried beneath it. The Jeanette de Palma murder. It was a quiet suburb, the kind of town where bad things were supposed to happen somewhere else. But that illusion shattered the day a family dog came home, carrying a human forearm. Police followed the trail through the woods to a rocky cliff, a local hangout known as the Devil's Teeth. There, they found the body of 16-year-old Jeanette de Palma, missing for 6 weeks. Her remains were badly decomposed, laid out on the ground in a strange, almost deliberate way. Surrounding her were makeshift wooden crosses and stone formations, arranged like symbols of some private ritual. To investigators, it looked less like a crime scene and more like an altar. Word spread fast. Whispers of witchcraft and satanic cults rippled through the town. Teenagers swore they'd seen hooded figures in the woods. Some locals even claimed Jeanette had been sacrificed in an occult ceremony. And while police never confirmed those theories, they didn't dismiss them either. The case files told a murkier story. Jeanette had been a devout Christian, not the type to run away, not known for risky behavior. Yet every potential suspect, every lead, dissolves into rumor. Then, nature itself erased what little evidence there was. A flash flood swept through the area, destroying police records, photographs, and physical clues, almost as if the case had been washed clean. All that remained were whispers, a missing girl, a cliff that locals avoid after dark, and a question that outlived the decade. Was Jeanette de Palma the victim of dark forces, or of something even more human and hidden beneath the surface of a frightened town? 50 years later, no one knows who killed her. The name Jeanette de Palma still echoes through Springfield, a reminder that evil doesn't always hide in shadows. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. The Ice Valley Mystery, the Isdal woman. Deep in a glacial ravine known as Isdal in the Ice Valley, hikers stumbled upon a site that would haunt Scandinavia for generations. Lying among the rocks and charred earth was the burned body of a woman. Her clothes were partly destroyed by fire, her hands and face unrecognizable. Near her, scattered in the frost, were an empty bottle of sleeping pills, a broken umbrella, and jewelry, neatly placed next to her body, as if arranged for someone to find. But this was no ordinary tragedy. When investigators combed through the scene, They found the woman's labels had been cut out from every item of clothing. Even her suitcase, discovered later in a Bergen train station, had its tags removed. Inside were wigs, cosmetics, maps, multiple currencies, and a coded notebook filled with cryptic combinations of numbers and letters, later determined to be travel records. The woman had checked into hotels under at least 8 different aliases, using fake passports from Belgium, Britain, and Switzerland. Witnesses described her as polite but distant, a striking brunette who paid cash and avoided conversation. Police called her Isdalskvinnen, the Isdal woman. Forensic experts determined she had likely died from a combination of smoke inhalation and barbiturate overdose, but they couldn't determine how the fire started or who set it. Her fingerprints were sent to Interpol. Nothing. Her dental records matched no known person in Europe, and so the theories began. Some said she was a spy, caught between East and West at the height of the Cold War, executed and left to burn. Others claimed she'd been part of a secret romantic affair that ended in violence. One hotel worker remembered her saying she was traveling for business, a kind of business that was secret. To this day, her true identity remains unknown. No family ever came forward. No country ever claimed her. Just a nameless woman in the snow, a suitcase full of lies, and a message lost in the code she left behind. In the Ice Valley, the mystery is eternal, and the Isdal woman still keeps her secret. The monster with 21 faces. It began like a crime thriller and ended like a ghost story. An anonymous group calling themselves the Monster with 21 Faces declared was on Japan's biggest candy companies. They didn't want money. They wanted chaos. Their first target was Izaki Glixo, the makers of Pocky and other sweets found in homes across the country. One spring night, masked intruders broke into the home of Glyco's president, Katsuhisa Izaki, tied up his family and kidnapped him. 3 days later, he escaped, naked, bound, and terrified, from a warehouse near Osaka. But the nightmare was only beginning. Weeks after the abduction, Glisso's offices caught fire in an arson attack. Then came a letter, signed by the monster with 21 faces. It taunted police and media alike, mocking their failure to catch them. The message was chilling. We have put poison in your candy. Soon after, Glico products vanished from store shelves nationwide. Shoppers panicked. Profits collapsed. And the gang, unseen, unheard, kept writing. Their words were sharp, sarcastic, and theatrical, borrowing language from Japanese pulp fiction writer Edogawa Rampo's Villains. They sent dozens of letters to newspapers and police headquarters, always ending with the same sinister challenge: catch us if you can. Then came the infamous security footage, a grainy video of a man in a baseball cap standing near a candy warehouse, his face expressionless, his movements deliberate. The media called him the videotaped man. To this day, he has never been identified. When Morinaga, another major confectionery company, received similar threats, police launched one of the largest manhunts in Japanese history. More than 125,000 officers followed every lead. None led anywhere. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. In August 1985, a final letter arrived. We decided to stop harassing food companies. The police are so incompetent. We are bored. Signed, as always, the monster with 21 faces. And just like that, they disappeared. No arrests, no witnesses, no trace. To this day, no one knows who they were, a gang, a single mind, or something in between. But for over a year, Japan lived in fear of the candy on its shelves, the letters in its mailboxes, and the faceless monster that mocked them all. Because sometimes the most terrifying villains are the ones who never show their face. Case 6, Canada's Mansion. Mystery. The Redpath family tragedy. Inside a mansion overlooking the city, the heirs to one of Canada's great fortunes lived lives of quiet elegance and unimaginable privilege. But one summer evening, that house fell silent forever. When servants rushed upstairs, They found 59-year-old Ada Maria Redpath, widow of the wealthy industrialist John Redpath, dead in her bedroom, a gunshot wound to her back. Lying nearby, bleeding out on the carpet, was her son Clifford, just 24 years old. Within minutes, both were gone. It was a scandal that shattered the illusion of security within Canada's aristocracy. Coroner ruled quickly. Temporary insanity. He claimed Clifford had suffered an epileptic fit, shot his mother, and then himself. Case closed. But for more than a century, that verdict has never been right. Doctors and family friends swore Clifford's condition wasn't violent, and the staff whispered about details that didn't match the story. 2 revolvers were found at the scene, and one was never fully accounted for. Servants nearby said they heard 2 gunshots, but no cries, no argument, nothing that suggested a struggle. Even stranger, no one called the police until the next day. By then, the bodies had already been prepared for burial. Both were interred within 48 hours before any real investigation could begin. Why the rush? Why the silence? And why did the city's most powerful family seem so eager to bury not just their dead, but the story itself? Some historians believe it was a cover-up, designed to protect the Redpath legacy and its millions. Others suggest a third person may have been in the room that night, someone who walked away through the mansion's marble halls, unseen. All that remains now is an unanswered question. In a house where whispers once echoed through wealth and wallpaper, over 100 years later, the Redpath tragedy still lingers like a ghost on Montreal's Golden Square Mile, a reminder that even behind polished doors, secrets don't die. They wait. Case 7, Missouri's cryptic murder, the Ricky McCormick case. In the tall grass of a cornfield, miles from the nearest town, a farmer made a grim discovery: the body of Ricky McCormick, a 41-year-old man with no car, no clear reason to be there, and no signs of struggle. But it wasn't the body that puzzled investigators. It was what they found inside his pockets. 2 handwritten notes, filled with jumbled letters, numbers, and strange symbols, a code that no one could read. It looked like nonsense, but to the FBI, it was something more. An unbroken cipher that might hold the key to his death. For more than 2 decades, the FBI's cryptanalysis and racketeering records unit, some of the sharpest codebreakers in the world, tried to crack it. They couldn't. They even turned to the American Cryptogram Association, a community of civilian code experts. Still nothing. The notes, known today as the McCormick ciphers, remain one of the FBI's most baffling puzzles. Ricky was no spy, no agent. He was an ordinary man, unemployed, living in a low-rent apartment, often in and out of hospitals for a heart condition. But investigators discovered a side of him few knew. He was illiterate on paper, yet he often wrote his own shorthand, an improvised code known only to him. So the question became chillingly simple. Did the cipher die with him? The FBI still believes those notes could contain a clue, a name, a place, maybe even the identity of his killer. But the cause of death remains undetermined. No trauma, no poison, no explanation. Some say he was meeting someone in that field, someone who knew exactly what he was carrying. Others believe those ciphers were never meant to be solved. Just the ramblings of a restless mind, scrambled in a secret language no one else could read. But one fact refuses to fade. The FBI doesn't keep a case open for 25 years, unless there's something there. And if those pieces of paper really were McCormick's final message, it's one he took to the grave, written in a code that may never speak again. Case 8. The Oslo Plaza woman, the mystery of Jennifer Fairgate. At the luxurious Plaza Hotel, one of the city's tallest buildings, a woman checked in under the name Jennifer Fairgate. She gave no ID, no credit card, just a smile, a Belgian address, and a single overnight bag. 3 days later, she was dead. Hotel security had gone to her room after multiple days of unanswered calls. When the guard knocked, he heard a single loud bang, a gunshot. Minutes later, inside room 2805, they found her body lying neatly on the bed, a 9mm Browning pistol resting next to her. One bullet through the forehead. No blood on her hands. Police ruled it a suicide. But almost immediately, the details began to fracture. The name, Jennifer Fairgate, didn't exist. Her passport was fake, her clothing labels removed, and her suitcase nearly empty. No hairbrush, no toothbrush, no signs of real travel. Even the serial number on the gun had been burned away with acid. The only thing that seemed real was her death. The coroner's report estimated her age at around 25. Her skin and nails were meticulously cared for. She wore no wedding ring, but her posture, her confidence, and the precision of her actions made one thing clear. This woman was trained. When authorities reached out to Interpol, no one by that name or appearance matched any record in Europe. Some believe she was an intelligence operative, working under deep cover during the final years of the Cold War, terminated by whoever discovered her identity. Others say she was a professional assassin, silenced after her last assignment went wrong. But one witness remembered something else. A man, a quiet figure who checked in next to her, then disappeared the next day without ever being seen again. The Norwegian police closed the case in 1996, calling it suicide. 99.9% certain. But as one investigator later said, that remaining 0.1% is what keeps me awake. Decades later, journalists and forensic teams reopened the mystery. Still no match for her DNA, no family, no past. All that's left is a name that never existed, a gun that tells no story, and a hotel room that still whispers when the lights go out. In Oslo, she checked in alone, and somewhere in the silence between truth and deception, she never checked out. Case 9, New Hampshire. Intrigue. The death of Dr. William K. Dean. In the rolling countryside of New Hampshire, a respected doctor, William K. Dean, vanished on his own farm. He'd gone out to milk the cows. He never came back. Hours later, his wife noticed the lantern still burning in the barn. Then she saw it. The cistern lid slightly ajar. Inside the water, police found Dean's body. Hands bound, a burlap sack pulled over his head, and a 20-pound stone tied to his chest. The town was stunned. Dr. Dean was known as gentle, generous, loved by patients and neighbors alike. But the scene was brutal, methodical, far beyond a simple robbery. Investigators questioned his wife, but she was frail, small, and grief-stricken. The local sheriff quietly dismissed her as a suspect. Attention turned to another man, Judge Charles Rich, Dean's friend, business partner, and one of the last people to see him alive. The morning after the murder, Rich appeared with a fresh black eye. He claimed a horse had kicked him. Yet witnesses recall strange behavior, nervous glances, conflicting statements, and an eagerness to deflect blame. Still, the mystery deepened when townsfolk began reporting strange lights flashing on Dean's property in the weeks before his death. A rumor spread a German spy was living nearby, sending coded signals into the night sky, relaying wartime secrets across the Atlantic. The Great War had just ended, and paranoia ran deep. Could Dean have stumbled onto espionage in his own backyard? Before his death, he told a neighbor heading to Boston that he had information for the police. No one ever learned what it was. Decades later, the case remains unsolved. The evidence long gone, the whispers long faded. But in that small corner of New England, some still claim to see lantern light moving across the fields on foggy nights, the restless spirit of Dr. Dean, still seeking to deliver the message he never got to share. Because in every quiet town, there's a secret buried deeper than anyone dares to dig. Case 10. Jimmy Hoffa, the vanishing of America's most powerful union boss. It was a clear afternoon when James Riddle Hoffa, the once untouchable president of the Teamsters Union, pulled into the parking lot of the Mash's Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township. He was there for a meeting. He never came home. Hoffa wasn't just a labor leader. He was power himself. A man who could summon strikes that froze entire industries, who knew the names of senators, mobsters, and millionaires alike. For years, he'd ruled the Teamsters with an iron fist and a phone book full of dangerous friends. But by the mid-70s, Hoffa's empire was cracking. He'd served time in prison for jury tampering and fraud, And while he was behind bars, the mafia moved in on the union's massive pension fund. Hundreds of millions of dollars in loans funneled through Vegas casinos and offshore accounts. When Hoffa walked out of prison, he wanted his throne back, and that made him a threat. He told his family he had a meeting that day with two men, Anthony Tony Pro Provenzano, a New Jersey mob captain, and Anthony Tony Jack Giacalone, a Detroit enforcer. Both denied it later. Witnesses saw Hoffa standing by his car, pacing, frustrated, checking his watch. Then, nothing. No body. No crime scenes. Just a man erased from history. In the decades that followed, investigators dug through fields, garages, and landfills across Michigan and New Jersey. Every lead, dead. Every witness, silent or gone. Some said Hoffa was taken to a meatpacking plant, dismembered and incinerated. Others claimed his body was mixed into the foundation of Giants Stadium in New Jersey. The FBI chased every rumor, every whisper, and still came up empty-handed. In 1982, Jimmy Hoffa was officially declared dead. But to this day, not a single shred of physical evidence has been found. To many, Hoffa's disappearance wasn't just a murder. It was a message. A warning from the underworld to anyone who thought they could cross the line between labor and organized crime. Nearly 50 years later, Hoffa's name still echoes through American folklore, the man who made enemies on every side and vanished into the machinery he helped build. Because in the world Hoffa ruled, loyalty was currency, and betrayal was fatal. Case 11. Murder in room 1046. The death of Roland T. Owen. A man walked into the elegant Hotel President, checked in under the name Roland T. Owen, and requested a small interior room, one without a view. He carried no luggage, just a comb, a toothbrush, and a quiet unease that seemed to follow him. He was young, polite, and distant, dressed sharply, speaking little. The clerk handed him the key to room 1046. By the next morning, that room would become a sealed box of unanswered questions. The maid remembered something odd. Owen sat in the dark, fully dressed, barely moving. When she offered to clean, he said, "Go ahead." A note on the nightstand read, "Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." Later that evening, she returned with towels. A rough male voice, not Owen's, growled from inside, "We don't need anyone." The next morning, the phone stayed off the hook. When a bellboy went up to check, he opened the door and froze. Owen was on his knees, bound, beaten, and stabbed, the bed and walls splattered with blood. He was still alive. Barely. When asked who had done this to him, he whispered one impossible answer: no one. He was taken to the hospital, where he slipped into a coma and died. Fingerprints, knives, clothing, all wiped clean. No Don, no suspect. Even his real name wasn't Roland T. Owen at all. Months later, the police identified him as Artemis Ogletree, a 17-year-old from Birmingham, Alabama. Then came the letters, emailed to his mother after his death, claiming he was traveling overseas. The handwriting was nothing like his. The final one said he'd married a wealthy woman in Cairo. 2 years later, another man was murdered in New York, beaten with a typewriter. Some detectives whispered the cases were linked, although no one could prove it. To this day, no one knows who Don was, what happened in room 1046, or why Ogletree's death was staged like a message. Some think it was organized crime. Others believe it was a jealous lover. But maybe it was something darker, a secret he carried that someone else wanted to erase forever. Nearly a century later, room 1046 stands still. Guests say they feel watched, and that sometimes, when the hallway lights flicker, they can still hear a voice behind the door whisper, "We don't need any." Case 12, Jagdse, the death of Gunther Stoll, Germany, 1984. Late one October night, food engineer Gunther Stoll suddenly stood up from his chair, eyes wide as if struck by revelation. "I've got it," he said. He rushed to a piece of paper and wrote 5 letters and a strange symbol, IOGTZE. Then he crossed it out. No one knew why. His wife said he had been restless for weeks, paranoid, convinced that they were out to get him. Who they were, he never said. That night, Stoll left home and drove to his favorite bar in Wilnsdorf. He ordered a beer, sat alone for a few minutes, then suddenly fell off his stool and hit the floor. He wasn't drunk, The bartender said it looked like he had fainted or realized something terrifying. Hours later, around 3 in the morning, 2 truck drivers spotted a crashed car on a quiet stretch of road outside Hagen. Inside the vehicle, naked and barely alive, was Gunther Stoll. He whispered something about 4 men before dying on the way to the hospital. But the details made no sense. The injuries didn't match a car crash. He'd been beaten before being placed in the passenger seat. There were leaves and dirt on his body, suggesting he had been dragged. No one ever found his clothes. And then there was the code, YOGTZE. Some thought it was YOGTZE, a reference to a German yogurt brand. Others swore it read YO6TZE, a radio signal used in Romania, a country tied to Cold War espionage at the time. Investigators could never decide what it meant. What is a warning? A name, a cipher only he understood? Decades later, the Yogtze mystery remains one of Germany's strangest unsolved cases. No suspects, no motive. Just a man who said he was being watched. And a code that still whispers from the edge of madness. Whatever Yogtze meant, it went to the grave with him. Case 13, the Vatican Girl, the disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi, Rome, 1983. A 15-year-old girl named Emanuela Orlandi left her family's apartment in Vatican City to attend a music class. She never came home. Her father worked for the Vatican Bank, and the Orlandi family lived behind the ancient walls of the world's most secretive city-state. When she disappeared, it wasn't just a missing person case. It became a storm that rocked the heart of the Catholic Church. Witnesses said they saw Emanuela speaking with a man near the music school, tall, dark-haired, claiming to sell Avon products. Others remembered a suspicious gray BMW circling the area that day. Then silence. Days turned into weeks. Anonymous callers reached out to the Orlandi family with impossible demands. Some claimed Emanuela was being held by extremists, demanding the release of a Turkish man who had tried to assassinate Pope John Paul II. Others tied the case to mafia money laundering and the Vatican Bank scandal. Each theory seemed plausible. Each one collapsed under its own weight. 19, a tip-off led Vatican officials to open 2 19th-century tombs in the Teutonic Cemetery, believed to hold the remains of 2 princesses. Inside, investigators found nothing. The tombs were empty. Beneath the nearby floor, they discovered something else. 2 hidden cavities filled with thousands of bones, enough to fill 24 bags. But none of them belonged to Emanuela. For decades, her case has been tangled in theories of espionage, organized crime, and divine conspiracy. Some believe she was kidnapped to send a message to the Vatican itself. Others whisper she still lives, hidden by those who could never allow her story to be told. To this day, the Vatican Girl remains Italy's most haunting mystery. A ghost at the gates of God's own city. Some secrets aren't buried in the ground. They're buried in power. Case 14, the Somerton Man. The Body on the Beach, Australia, 1948. Just before dawn on the 1st of December, a man was found slumped against a seawall on Somerton Beach, south of Adelaide. He looked asleep, but when police arrived, they realized he was dead. He was well-dressed, a crisp brown suit, polished shoes, and a clean-shaven face. There were no signs of struggle, no ID, and every label had been carefully cut from his clothing. Even his hat was immaculate, as though placed there deliberately. No one recognized him. He had no wallet, no passport, no fingerprints on record anywhere in the world. An autopsy found traces of poison, but none they could identify. The coroner called it the most puzzling death in Australian history. Then investigators discovered something stranger. Hidden in a secret pocket sewn inside his trousers was a small, torn scrap of paper. On it, 2 Persian words were printed. Tamam shud. It means, it is finished. Police traced the paper to a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a book of Persian poetry about fate and mortality. The copy was found inside an abandoned car, and in its back page, they found a series of handwritten letters that formed a code. It has never been deciphered. Investigators also found a phone number in the book, belonging to a young nurse named Justin, who lived just blocks away from where the man was found. When police showed her the plaster cast of his face, she turned pale. She refused to explain why. Over 70 years later, the mystery still endures. In 2021, the body was exhumed for DNA testing. Some experts now believe he was Carl Webb, an engineer from Melbourne, but if that's true, it only answers one question, not the dozens that follow. Who was he meeting that night? Why were his clothes stripped of labels? And what secret did Tamam Shud mark as finished? Perhaps the answer lies not in who the Somerton Man was, but in what he knew. Because some stories don't end. They simply fade into silence. Case 15, the Mary Celeste, the ghost ship that sailed itself. December 1872. The vast Atlantic stretched silently and endlessly when a British brig called De Gratia spotted another ship drifting aimlessly near the Azores. Its sails were torn. It's, of course, uncertain, and not a soul in sight. That ship was the Mary Celeste, an American merchant vessel bound for Genoa, Italy. When the boarding party climbed aboard, what they found would become one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history. The ship was completely seaworthy. The cargo of 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol was untouched. Food and water for 6 months still lined the galley. The captain's logbook ends abruptly, mid-sentence. In the captain's cabin, a woman's sewing machine still sat by the bed. A child's toys rested neatly on the floor, but the lifeboat was missing. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 7 crew members had disappeared without a trace. No blood, no signs of violence. Only the eerie quiet of a ship still moving, without its people. Theories spread like waves. Some said pirates, others whispered mutiny, seaquakes, or even alcohol fumes causing the crew to panic and abandon ship. But none of it fits. Every rope was tied, every log intact. Even the ship's clock was still ticking when she was found. For centuries, the story of the Mary Celeste has haunted sailors, writers, and historians alike. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, wrote a fictionalized account. Yet truth still drifts beyond reach. Because somewhere out there between storm and superstition, a ship once sailed itself across an empty ocean, carrying nothing but silence and unanswered questions, and the sea has never given her secrets back. 15 stories, 15 puzzles that time refused to solve. From the locked rooms of London to the cold valleys of Norway, to the sun-bleached sands of Australia. Each case leaves the same echo, a name, a symbol, a question mark that never fades. And for every investigator who followed the trail, there's a moment they all remember. That split second when truth feels close enough to touch before it slips back into the dark. Maybe some of these mysteries will be solved one day. Maybe technology or time will bring the answers that human eyes couldn't. But maybe some stories were meant never to end, because there's something deeper about the unsolved, something human. Each one reminds us how fragile life really is, how secrets outlive people, and how silence can speak louder than confession. The truth hides in archives, in dust, in memory, waiting for someone to care enough to look again. And maybe that someone is you. Until then, the world keeps turning. The shadows keep watching. And the cold cases remain what they've always been. Unfinished chapters in a story that refuses to die. This is Audioman Dark Stories, and these were 15 of the most haunting mysteries ever left behind. Until next time, stay curious, stay awake, and never stop listening to the dark.